Hello and welcome to the Symposium. My name's Carl and I'm going to talk about a possible source for secular duties. Now, this is stuff I haven't finished thinking through, and I'm going to be doing a lot of thinking off the top of my head as I talk about this, but it all stems from an idea that is in the back of my head that I can't get out. I can't seem to expiate this itch that's scratching at my thought process. And I think I'm freaking a lot of people out with it, but I think it's something that has to be talked about. And I don't know how exactly you can frame these things from people who are embedded in Enlightenment ideologies. So that's most Westerners. It's part of their worldview. The Enlightenment is part of their worldview. It's sunk very, very deeply into the general understanding of the world that Westerners have. This is why the veneration of science as the only source of knowledge is the primary revealing characteristic, in my opinion, of this. Compare that to a religious country, an Islamist country, or something like that. Obviously, it's not the same. It's not they don't have use for science. It's just that they prioritize religious teaching above science. And we do the opposite here. I think that that's the right way to do things, obviously. But you can't deny that religion does have some advantages that the secular worldview is, which is what I'll just call the Enlightenment worldview. The secular worldview does have lacking from its core moral components. And so, essentially, I think that Kant really did hammer on home on the moral origin of Enlightenment thought. And this had been embedded in myself without me even realizing it. As in, Kant believed that man should be an end in and of himself, and this will make him essentially a legislator in what Kant called the kingdom of ends. And this is the kingdom of rational beings who make who establish a priori moral decisions and judgments. And these are transcendental. These are prior to contact with the world. So they're things that are moral choices that should be before we've achieved anything. And there are a whole bunch of assumptions that are underlying these. And I'm not an expert on this either, but I'm trying to work all of this out. And as I understand it, and Kant said this explicitly, he wanted to create a secular, non-theological origin for these, for the sort of origin of morality, as in normally the place where God had inhabited, as in God has commanded that X, Y, or Z, thou shalt not, thou shalt. This will come from this hive mind of legislators who can all make moral pronouncements from some kind of a priori judgment. And nobody ever conceives of it. This is not how they think of it. But I think that is what is happening. And I think Kant was right to establish that the Enlightenment, this is the kind of end, the perfecting of Enlightenment moral thought is that. But the thing is, I really have a problem with this, because I think that the problem with the Enlightenment is it really doesn't deal with the human being as an animal very well. Aristotle defined humans as a rational animal, and it seems that the rational part has been venerated by Enlightenment thinkers up until this day. And so the problem that we have is that the animal part is the real and necessary, and what Kant would call the contingent part of the human being. This is the part of the human being that lives in the real world, that operates in reality, that moves around and does things, and has pressures put on it. And so it has needs, has desires, and there are incentives that it responds to. And the body, like Jonathan Haidt's work on the way that people respond to emotionally to all of these sort of things, to any of these sort of questions. He likens it to an elephant. So you've got the sort of the lizard brain part. I don't Freudian like the ego or something, or super ego. I don't know. But the emotional side of your person is like a giant elephant, and it's very difficult to control, but it does have a rider, which is your rational brain. And if the elephant is calm and it's not startled and it's not scared or worried in any way, then the rational brain can actually get it to change direction. It's difficult to do, and I think that's a good metaphor for essentially what's happening. And so the Enlightenment is concerned with the rider exclusively, but the rider isn't really necessarily in control of the elephant. And so I've been thinking about this. The problem with the Enlightenment is that if you've got this rational kingdom of ends, then the assumption is, well, if you were just an end in yourself, then what do you owe to anyone else? And the answer would seem to be nothing. If it's all about me, then my total freedom means self-indulgence for myself. And I think that's really unhealthy, because if you look at the animal side of you, gets fat and weak and lazy and addicted, and becomes not as fine as and well kept as it probably should be. This kind of excessive self-indulgence, I think, is actually destructive, and it is actually hurting people. I mean, you can look at the statistics for venereal disease in the gay community to know that maybe some form of self-restraint is possibly warranted when it comes to our sexuality. Sex is not an act without consequence, and this is something that the religious have known for a long time, the religious traditions. Now, I'm an atheist, so I don't believe in God, and I've never been religious in any way, shape, or form. My parents it just didn't come up. So I've got no religious impulses whatsoever. So I'm looking at religion as a total outsider. And I'm thinking, well, if you're religious, you'll have to indulge my atheism for a moment. But I think that if God wasn't necessary, who was it that said if God wasn't necessary, it would be required to invent him? It's probably Voltaire or Nietzsche or someone. But I think this is essentially what has happened with religious doctrines. The font of moral commandment, the origin of your duties, God says you must, thou shalt. Regardless of whether you agree that a God had indicated and instructed mankind to do that, there's no doubt that there is a consequential benefit to having done certain things. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not adulterize, whatever it is. These are good because the things that are being forbidden are things that have demonstrably harmful consequences. And so when it, go forth and multiply, be fruitful, if that's to be taken as religion endorsing the family unit and the raising of children and the care for your own children and your own family, and treat this as a thing in of itself, I mean, that's productive, that's good for the proliferation of the religion, because children grow up with the worldview of their parents, even if they become ideologically possessed by socialism or communism or fascism, whatever ideology it is later on in their life. They still have that worldview of the society that they grew up in, formed in the household of their parents. So even if they were, say, raised religious and say, well, no, I don't believe in God anymore, I'm an atheist, I think the parents still have an awful amount of hold on them just because of the way that they were formed. And I think the religious knew this, and obviously this allegedly came from God, but not that they explicitly say this, but they understand that it's good for the propagation of the religion to have fruitful families that build strong societies. And that's true. That's just a true thing. Whether God said it or not, that's a true thing. But the opposite seems to be happening to Enlightenment societies, and we can see this with the birth rates. Now, globally, birth rates are generally down, but not universally, and especially so in modern, highly advanced Western or Westernized societies. So this is as true in Japan as it is in Britain or Germany. But it's a certain kind of society where essentially, and I'm not saying that it's just women who have got the burden here, because it's not. Men have duties and responsibilities in this regard too. But societies that have made it permissible for women to not marry, for women to not have children, for women to have careers instead of families, these societies, their birth rates are in massive decline. Massive, massive decline. And it's going to essentially lead to a hollowing out of these cultures at some point, assuming we don't keep on allowing millions of immigrants to cross our borders. Then it's conceivable that in, say, 100 years' time, there'll only be sort of 20 million people in Japan, where there's 120 million people now. And they'll be wandering through ghost towns, empty cities that just don't have population because there's no one there to live there. And that's not good for the security of their country, is it? I mean, China's right on the doorstep. If China doesn't do the same thing, then how will the Japanese physically resist the Chinese invasion if they can just be swamped? The Japanese way of life will not be able to continue. So if we could agree that Japan is a good country, has good people in it, and it probably should continue, well, we can see how it won't. And if a country ends up having just a demographic collapse and becoming unpopulated, well, then someone else is going to populate that, who has an ethic of family values and the production of subsequent generations. So there is a real world need for this kind of ethos, whether you like it or not, and whether the rational animal on the elephant agrees or not. At the end of the day, the rational animal, the rational rider, is not really the guy who should be in charge. He's just the guy who should be directing the elephant. And so this is why I flip back to, so we've got God demanding that you have children, you have families, you become married, and this is where you derive duty from. And so virtue is in pursuing that duty. So you can say, right, this guy's had 4 kids or something, he's been virtuous, he hasn't been deficient, he hasn't been excessive, as Aristotle would frame it. So this is a good Christian man who's had a large family or whatever it is. But we can't say the same thing from an Enlightenment perspective, because if it's all about you, then there's no doubt that children are difficult, right? It's not easy to be a parent, and no one thinks it is, but it is something that everyone did practically. But now we're seeing such a large number of people who decide they're just not going to, that it's actually having knock-on effects for society. And so the question that I'm wrestling with at the moment is there a way of deriving these kind of duties from a secular perspective, from Kant's legislator in a kingdom of ends? And whenever I bring this up, I've noticed that women who have actively deferred or refused to have children feel very personally attacked, and unsurprising, really. Of course they felt personally attacked, but I'm not personally attacking them, because I'm just asking them, do you feel like you owe society around you anything? And to a certain degree, I think they do, but they don't feel that they owe the society that birthed them and gave them the freedoms that they have the continuation of that society. And when this is brought up, it's like, well, we can convert immigrants to become like us and view Enlightenment values, and I'm sure for a lot of them that will happen. We know that in Britain that's not happening for a lot of them, but that feasibly we could do that. But isn't that just a massive dereliction of duty? Isn't that them just being a parasite on these immigrants? Why would the immigrants want to support some person who's going to be like, you know what, no, you can just do what I want? Why wouldn't the immigrants say, well, no, why don't we just wait till you die off? And then this country will be populated with no one but ourselves, and we don't have to listen to your nonsense at all. Like, we've got this figured out. You don't. You've walked yourself into a cul-de-sac, an evolutionary cul-de-sac, where you're actively choosing to exit the gene pool at this point. There's no your worldview for us, because you're going to go away, and it seems to have been a demonstrable failure. If continuation of your civilization is a mark of success. And it's weird that this isn't a mark of success. Like, if you've inherited a modern liberal Enlightenment country, then surely you would want to continue that modern liberal Enlightenment country. But instead, we've got to the point where the only good thing that people seem to think is good these days is just doing what is, satisfying the pleasures of the elephant. And I don't think that that's necessarily the only thing that's good. In fact, I mean, John Stuart Mill argued that, and all of the sort of consequentialists argued, the primary argument, the first argument they hit with is, why don't we just take drugs and have sex all day? And they'll say, well, this is purely what an animal would find to be satisfying. This isn't going to satisfy the life of a man because he's got higher intellectual pursuits. It's like, sure, but I think, and so, that's a fine argument. But I think there are actually sort of virtuous pursuits and pursuits that require a modicum of self-sacrifice that are also rewarding, and I say this because I am a father, and it is difficult, but the rewards are amazing. Like, the rewards are genuinely amazing. And this kind of selfish fear of never having to essentially grow up and become the parent yourself and forever indulge in whatever vices it is you have because they apparently have no knock-on consequences. Well, I think we can show there are knock-on consequences. Like, pornography has negative consequences. Like, single parenthood has negative consequences. And so if we are optimizing for good, healthy people, and I think that would be wise, we probably should be trying to optimize for healthy families. And that means that we have a duty to form a family. Because if we don't do that, well, either we're not contributing, or we might end up producing a broken family that is bad for the children that it raises. And I think we can end up deriving some sort of set of secular duties that we have to one another that just goes beyond not interfering with other people's business. Because that's not the problem, that we're not saying that we need to keep out of each other's business. No one's having a problem with that anymore. We're having a problem with the ability to find ourselves compelled to contribute to the civilization from which we are benefiting. And if we don't recognize that we have a duty to maintain the things that we have inherited and pass them down to a next generation, then we will have just used up all of our time indulging ourselves in the fruits of this civilization without making any provision for its continuation and for its proliferation. And that seems really irresponsible to me. I think we probably could say with a bit of firmness that we have a duty to do something to perpetuate the state of affairs that we were given. We didn't create this, but we did inherit it, and we're meant to be maintaining it, because if the Enlightenment project is to succeed, well, it's got to continue on into the future. It can't just be subsumed into its own self-centeredness. And I'm really worried that that's what's happening. And so I think I'll leave it there, because, I mean, there's a huge amount that I haven't tapped in this yet. This is a big subject. And I'm more than happy for people to kick my ass in the comments, because I'm not sure that I haven't misinterpreted something here, or I'm not getting something wrong, but I don't think I am. And I'd love to hear from you guys. I'll be looking forward to reading the comments on this. But anyway, thanks for watching.